Hello, dear listener. Today I will tell you about 9 short, but very scary stories. Sit back, put on your headphones, and turn off the lights. Long arms.
A long time ago, there was a red spot in one city. Some boy will have it, for example, above the bed. The boy will fall asleep, and at night long, thin and hairy hands will come out of this spot and strangle the boy. A lot of people strangled those hands. The victims were mostly small boys and girls. As it turned out, these hands were weak and could not strangle an adult man or a more or less strong woman. The residents of this city have come up with a remedy for the red spot. It just had to be urgently covered with some paint or glued on top of a large piece of wallpaper. Or you could just not go to bed in this room, but go, for example, to ask your parents. The red spot also began to cheat. It appeared in some inconspicuous place under the bed, behind the bookshelf, under the carpet, and sometimes it even appeared under the pillow, right on the sheet. People had to inspect their bedrooms and children's rooms very carefully, all the rather large things on which this red spot could appear. The red spot cheated again. It became a white spot. It will hide on the white ceiling, but it is not visible there. Then people had to put on duty at night. Everyone living in the apartment will gather in one room and go to sleep there. And one is on duty. If hands appear, then he starts shouting loudly, everyone will be there, and everyone runs away to another room. Then the red spot had to attack the lonely old ladies. After all, no one will protect them. A lot of old ladies died in the city. Then the remaining old ladies wrote a letter to the city hall, asking them to protect them. The mayor thought about it, went to the bathhouse, thought again, and decided, now every old lady needs a policeman for the night. And so they did. And one young policeman really didn't like the fact that he had to guard old ladies. He hadn't spent the night at home in months. And his young wife said she would leave him if he didn't spend the night at home. Then the policeman took out an old great-grandfather's saber, and he decided that as soon as he saw the hands, he would chop them down with the saber. And then, late at night, these long, thin and hairy arms appear. The policeman cuts them off. Then he puts them in a bag for physical evidence. And when he returned home, he saw that his wife was lying dead and with her hands cut off.
Faces in portraits.
One man got lost in the forest. He wandered for a long time and finally came across a hut at dusk. There was no one inside and he decided to go to bed. But he could not fall asleep for a long time because there were portraits of some people hanging on the walls, and it seemed to him that they were looking at him ominously. Eventually he fell asleep from exhaustion. In the morning he was awakened by bright sunlight. There were no paintings on the walls. These were windows.
Damaged film.
One girl photographer decided to spend the day and night alone in a deep forest. She was not afraid, because this was not the first time she had gone hiking. She spent the day photographing trees and grass with a film camera, and in the evening settled down to sleep in her small tent. The night passed peacefully. Horror overtook her only a few days later. All 4 reels produced excellent images, except for the last frame. All the photographs were of her, sleeping peacefully in her tent in the darkness of the night.
Call from the nanny.
One day, a married couple decided to go to the cinema and leave the children with a babysitter. They put the children to bed, so the young woman just had to stay home, just in case. Soon the girl got bored and decided to watch TV. She called her parents and asked their permission to turn on the TV. They naturally agreed, but she had one more request. She asked if it was possible to cover the statue of an angel outside the window with something, because it made her nervous. The phone went quiet for a second, and then the father who was talking to the girl said, "Take the kids and run from the house. We'll call the police. We don't have an angel statue." The police found everyone remaining at home dead. The angel statue was never discovered.
Who's there?
About 5 years ago, in the dead of night, there were 4 short rings at my door. I woke up, got angry and didn't open it. I wasn't expecting anyone. On the second night, someone called again 4 times. I looked through the peephole, but there was no one outside the door. I was telling this story this afternoon, and I joked that death probably had the wrong door. On the third evening, a friend came to me and stayed up late. The doorbell rang again, but I pretended not to notice anything to check if I was hallucinating. But he heard everything perfectly well, and after my story exclaimed, "Let's deal with these jokers," and ran out into the yard. That was the last time I saw him that night. No, he didn't disappear. But on the way home, he was beaten by a drunken company, and he died in the hospital. The calls stopped. I remembered this story because I heard 3 short doorbells last night. Don't open the door. A 12-year-old girl lived with her father. They had a great relationship. One day, my father was going to stay late at work and said he would be back late at night. The girl waited for him, and finally went to bed. She had a strange dream her father was standing on the other side of a busy highway and shouting something at her. She barely heard the words, "Don't open the door," and then the girl woke up from the bell. She jumped out of bed, ran to the door, looked through the peephole, and saw her father's face. The girl was about to open the lock when she remembered a dream, and his father's face was somehow strange. She stopped. The bell rang again.
Dad? Dad, answer me. Is there someone there with you? Dad, why don't you answer? The girl was almost crying. I'm not opening the door until you answer me.
The doorbell rang and rang, but my father was silent. The girl was huddled in the corner of the hallway. This went on for about an hour, then the girl fell into oblivion. At dawn, she woke up and realized that the doorbell was no longer ringing. She crept up to the door and looked through the peephole again. Her father was still standing there, looking right at her. The girl carefully opened the door and screamed. Her father's severed head was nailed to the door at eye level. There was a note attached to the doorbell with just 2 words, "Smart girl."
Home and silence.
My wife and I bought a house. We got it at a fairly low price. I already understand that this is strange, but then I was just happy about the purchase and such a low price tag. Our family is young, there are no children yet, but they are planned. In general, my wife and I moved into a new house, did some repairs, everything was fine. However, soon the oddities began. Everything that happened below is listed in chronological order. At night, we sleep with my wife in the bedroom. Suddenly, we wake up from some kind of rumble, as if something had fallen. Well, we jumped up on the bed, we sit, we listen. There was no more noise, but my wife kicked me out from under the blanket anyway, saying, "Go take a look." I reluctantly got up and walked around the whole house. Everything was calm. I didn't find any traces of something that had fallen anywhere. I went back to the bedroom to sleep. After a while, the rumble was repeated. And I had already heard it quite clearly, and this time I imagined where it was coming from. I got up and went into the next room. I go in, and everything is fine there, no objects on the floor that could create such a roar. I got angry. What the hell? I turned around and was about to go to bed, but I felt a kind of draft on my feet. I decided that apparently my wife opened the window for ventilation and did not close it. I go up to the window, pull the curtains apart, and from what I see outside, I jump almost to the ceiling and start yelling at the whole house. A nasty old woman was looking at me from the street with big white eyes. She was so scary that it seemed as if she had just died a couple of weeks ago. Meanwhile, my wife in the bedroom also started screaming, apparently out of fear, and calling for me. I don't even remember how I got to the bedroom. The wife is hysterical, sobbing, muttering that she wants to leave here as soon as possible. I'm on pins and needles too. In short, after about 12 minutes, I walked away from what I saw, gathered my strength and decided to go outside to check what the hell was going on. He took a hammer with him and went out the door. Damn, I went around everything, nothing. There's not even a trace. Then who did I see outside the window? I returned to the house, calmed my wife somehow, but that night we did not fall asleep. The next day we did a little bit of digging to get ourselves in order, did something there, and then it was night again. My wife and I are on edge, we don't want to sleep, we sit watching TV, everything is fine. Suddenly the electricity goes out all over the house. Well, I went to the hallway to check the traffic jams. Everything turned out to be fine with them. On the way back, I decided to go to the kitchen to get candles and a flashlight. On the way, I looked into the room. My wife was sitting on the couch. I told her that everything was okay with the traffic jams, that I would bring candles now. I come to the kitchen, and my wife is standing there and digging into the jokes. People, I almost fainted. As a result, I took a flashlight, my wife took candles, and we went back to the living room. I go and pray that no one is there. I didn't tell my wife anything, because if she sees something like this, she might die. I didn't know then how I hadn't at least fainted. Fortunately, there was no one in the living room. As soon as we placed and lit the candles, the light came on. We cursed our government, took away the candles, and decided to go to bed. And I'm not up to sleep. After all, I saw something. At that moment, I was just beginning to understand why we got this house so cheaply. The former owners knew about everything that was going on here, but they didn't tell us. I don't remember falling asleep that night. I woke up to the fact that the room was cold. My wife was lying with her back to me. I covered her with another blanket and went to the kitchen to smoke. And so I'm standing with a cigarette when my wife comes into my kitchen and asks why I took her to sleep in the living room on the sofa when she fell asleep next to me in the bedroom. I told her that I didn't understand what kind of nonsense she was talking about and that I had covered her with a blanket in the bedroom 5 minutes ago. In general, we were very surprised and decided to go to the bedroom to check who I was hiding there. They came to the doors and I opened them softly, and oh my God, what did I see there? That nasty old woman was lying on our bed. My wife and I rushed into the living room like crazy. I called the police, but they even taxed me and threatened me with a fine if I bullied them like that anymore. Then I called a few of my friends and explained the situation. They arrived, and we all went around the house together. Nothing suspicious was noticed. My wife told me that she would not stay here for anything and went to live with her mother until I dealt with all this damn thing. I was left alone in the house. The first thing I decided to do was to call the former owners of the house, and so he did. They told me they didn't know anything, but there was anxiety in their voice, and I realized they were lying. As it turned out later, they were also victims in this house, just like us, but they couldn't do anything and sold this house to us cheaper. The house clearly didn't have a very good past. The next day, I called the priest. As soon as he stepped outside the house, he immediately said that he was very bad and advised us to move out of here. In turn, I advised him to do his job in silence and not give out advice. He consecrated the house and left. To be honest, I really didn't want to test his work that night, but there was nothing I could do. I had to thoroughly check everything. It was terribly scary. I bought myself alcohol for courage. In the evening, I was sitting next to the TV, drinking beer, and fell asleep unnoticed by myself. I woke up at night because I was wildly hungry for a little. I went to the bathroom. I'm standing, so I'm doing my business, and then I hear a knock on the front door, not the toilet, but at home. I thought my wife had arrived. Fuck knows why I didn't even think about the fact that it was night outside. Probably because of the beer I drank. In short, I go to the door, looked through the peephole, just like my wife is standing. Well, I let her in, and she was like, "I'm going to sleep," and she left. I woke up only in the morning from a phone call. My wife called. The first thing I asked her was where she was. The answer was from Mom. I almost turned grey. He rushed out of the house like a bullet, almost knocked the door off its hinges. I run out onto the lawn, look back at the house, and there this terrible old woman is standing and looking at me from the bedroom window. Then I concluded that after the consecration, I myself brought her back into the house and launched her. So I witnessed an inexplicable phenomenon. Soon we sold the house for about the same price we bought it for. Later I found out from the newspapers that this house burned down and the whole family died in the fire. Their bodies were found in the storeroom, and I can guess who they were hiding from there.
If parents swear by the children's lives.
When I married my husband, I was a young and stupid girl. It seemed to me that my husband would always be as cheerful, kind, and loving as he was before the wedding. But in 10 years of living together, he has changed a lot. My husband is a prominent, handsome man. He is charming and can charm anyone. Besides, he is a good musician. In short, it would not be an exaggeration if I said that many women and girls were crazy about him. At first, he didn't look at anyone except me, But gradually he began to look at other women, and then he began to walk around recklessly. He was not stopped by my tears, nor by our 2 children who, although they were small, understood perfectly well that everything was not going smoothly at home. When he cheated on me for the first time, then almost on his knees begged me to forgive him, swore that this would not happen again. I was very upset and offended, but then I loved my husband, so when I heard his sincere promises, as it seemed at the time, I forgave and did not leave home. Although all my threats then were, by and large, just words, where could I go with 2 small children? Then my husband began a second affair on the side, a third, a fourth. I suffered a lot. I was jealous, and I couldn't understand those girls and women who contacted my husband. After all, he never hid from anyone that he has a wife and 2 young sons. From time to time, his girlfriends called me on the phone and told me how my husband loves them, but tolerates me only because of the children. Several times I tried to leave, but each time my mother-in-law dissuaded me, assuring me that my husband would soon get over it and we would live as before. One day my husband did not come to spend the night, but I, having already got used to his antics, cried and went to bed. But he didn't show up for work the next morning either, and he never allowed himself to do that. Then I was really scared. My husband did not appear for a whole week, and all this time my mother-in-law and I were going crazy with fear. We called all the hospitals, and then all the morgues, where we were told that they had unidentified corpses and needed to come and look at them. Imagine what happened to us then. I was sure that something had happened to my husband. Although he did not feel sorry for me, he should have felt sorry for the children and his elderly mother, or so it seemed to me. And so a week later, he showed up at home. For the first time in many years, I suddenly realized that I couldn't live like this anymore. I didn't care where my children and I would get settled. The main thing was to get away from my husband. I started to pack my things, but my husband initially decided that I was just playing a show. He became worried only after he heard that I had called a taxi on the phone. Then he began to beg for forgiveness, almost lying at his feet and swearing once again that this would not happen again. But it is not for nothing that they say that a single drop overflows the cup of patience. I looked at my husband and he disgusted me. I suddenly felt joy from the realization that in an hour I would get rid of all these problems forever. I will be able to live in peace. I will not have to endure insults and humiliation. I will not have to cry. Apparently, my husband felt my determination because he fell to his knees and swore by the health of our children that he would never cheat on me again. After these words, I still forgave him and stayed. And how can you not believe a father who swears by the lives of his own children? For almost a year we lived with him as before. We went fishing with the whole family, went hiking, and constantly visited theaters. The children have become calmer, and they are making progress in their studies. They were happy for us and were happy. One day my husband said, "What a fool I was, because I always knew that all women are the same. And why did I have such a bunch of mistresses? After all, you are my smartest and most beautiful, and I am terribly lucky that I met you." And about a month after this conversation, my husband called me by a false name. Then he tried to make a joke of it, but I realized that he had someone again. But my main misfortune was ahead. A few days after my husband's joke, an accident occurred in which our children died. I am sure that my husband is to blame for this misfortune. He swore on the children's lives and did not keep his word. After burying the boys, I left home at a time when my husband was with another mistress. I will never forgive him for the death of my children, and I will never return to him again.
The Glass Doll.
One girl had a birthday. She was given many different gifts. One of the guests gave her a glass doll. The girl didn't even notice who gave her this doll. It's just that in the evening, when she was sorting out her gifts, she saw this glass doll. The girl had never seen glass dolls before. Therefore, she took an interest in this gift. The doll was the size of a Barbie. She was wearing a beautiful blue dress. She herself was made entirely of glass. But it wasn't one solid piece of glass. The doll's head, arms, and legs were moving. They were made on tricky hinges. The girl immediately began to play with the new doll. She introduced her to old dolls, showed her doll furniture, arranged a crib for her. Soon the girl was forced to go to bed. She quickly fell asleep, but soon someone woke her up. It was a glass doll. She was moving. The doll was gesturing for the girl to go somewhere. The girl got out of bed. The glass doll took her out into the hallway and began to point at the front door. The girl became interested. She put on her slippers, picked up the doll, quietly opened the door, and went out onto the landing. The doll was pointing downwards. That's where we went. We went down to the first floor. The doll began to point somewhere under the stairs. The girl looked in and saw a small door. She guessed that it was the door to the basement. There was a lock on the door, but the doll stuck its thin handle into the crack of the lock, and the lock opened. They went down to the basement. It was dark and damp. It was good that the doll could glow. She glowed a little, but it was enough to see where the doll was pointing and not stumble over something under her feet. Soon they came to a brick wall. The doll touched her with her hands and the wall moved apart a little. The doll was pointing at the gap, hinting that they needed to go there, but the girl was scared. She wanted to go home. But then the doll made a scary face. The girl got scared and stepped into the gap. There was a staircase leading down. For a long, long time they walked up this staircase. The stairs were getting higher and higher. I had to not just walk on them, but jump off the next step every time. The girl was so tired that she let go of the doll. She began to walk up the stairs by herself. It even seemed to the girl that the doll had become a little bigger. 2 hours later, they entered a huge hall the size of a stadium. The girl looked around and saw a lot of kids. Boys and girls came out of many different doors and went down to a large area the size of a football field. Every boy or girl had a glass doll. And all these dolls were alive and all of huge stature, the size of an 8-year-old child. The girl looked at her doll. It also became huge. The girl went down to the playground. All the children came down too. No one else appeared. Suddenly, a huge pipe descended from above. Very cold steam began to pour out of it. Whoever got this steam froze immediately, turning into a huge piece of ice. When all the children turned into ice cubes, they were first stripped and then put on all sorts of blue and pink dresses and suits. This was done by glass dolls, each doll dressed its owner. After that, all the girls and boys turned into glass dolls. Thus there were twice as many glass dolls, and they all went upstairs to look for new owners.